welcome to another episode of the Superbold podcast. I'm Fred Joyal, and today I'm here with Marcus Sheridan, who is a phenomenal keynote speaker. He's done over 750 live performances. I like to think of them as performances. He's got a fantastic book that we're going to dive into. They Ask, You Answer, which is a top-rated sales book, and we're going to find out how that works, because I'm very interested in sales, because I'm always selling myself in one way or another. And we're gonna talk about boldness, bold moves he's made, bold moves he didn't make, and learn from him along the way. Marcus, great to see you. Welcome to the episode.
Yeah, Fred. Happy to be here. I think we're going to have a great conversation.
So what began your journey in speaking? Because I'm a big believer in communication as the number one life skill. And you have certainly mastered it and are teaching it. But how did you get on this pathway?
Yeah, to your point, there's a study that came out, and they said the number one factor that dictates average income is one's ability to communicate. Way more than their level of, let's say, schooling or education, wherever that might be, right? And so for me, I started a swimming pool company in 2001. I was right out of college with a couple of buddies. Didn't think I was going to be a pool guy. Became a pool guy, kind of fell into it. Market collapses in 2008, and it looks like we're going to have to lose the business. I'm going to file bankruptcy. That was a really stressful time. But the good thing about stress and pain, Fred, is it allows us to do things that we probably should have already been doing, right? That's when we can get really bold and just send it, right? And so it was during this time where I started really learning about today's buyer and thinking about how I had changed, started reading phrases online like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media. And what I heard in my simple pool guy mind was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns, and you're willing to address them online on your website, through text, through video, you might save your business. So I said, well, if there's one thing I can do, I can listen well, and I can address those questions online. And I can recall one night, Fred, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I brainstormed every question I'd received over the years as a pool guy, and had like a couple hundred questions I wrote down. And then over the next couple of years, I addressed each one thoroughly on our website through articles, through videos, and we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And as this was happening, I said, my goodness, I got a little something here that I think other companies should be doing. And so I started to write about that just on a personal blog, and that started to get traction. And then suddenly people started to say to me, can you teach my company how to do that thing you did with your pool company? Can you share that story about your pool company from my stage? And as soon as I got a few stages, it really just took off. And I think one of the big reasons, Fred, was because it was a story about a pool guy. He almost lost everything and just did a bunch of innovative stuff that I'm sure we can talk about, a lot of bold stuff that revolutionized the business, changed the entire industry, and of course, changed my life.
I mean, it is so interesting how a crisis precipitates the discovery. It literally is you're doing the Chinese proverb where crisis is opportunity.
Yeah, that's like why if we do have a recession or whatever you want to call it coming up, we're going to see incredible innovation, because it forces us outside of our comfort zone. And in my case, I was like, oh, you got nothing to lose, buddy. So you might as well just send it, right? That's a really powerful place to be. The problem is, too often we have to experience pain in order to do those things that are outside of the box. But if we are able to do those while we're in a state of prosperity, then you just become a forever leader of your industry or whatever that thing is.
Now that's big, because most humans in general only react when things are so bad that they have to change. Mm-hmm. Whether you're overcoming, say, alcoholism, or your business is, on the verge of bankruptcy, whatever that, now you've got to step up and accept change. The rest of us don't want to change if we don't have to. We like being comfortable. but we're not really getting anywhere. It's a static state to be in comfort. And
Yeah,
how do you escape that?
well, I think this is why we have high achievers and why we also have the majority, which is they don't live in that place. There's this thing called the pride cycle, which is incredibly powerful. If I had a visual, I could explain it, but I'll try to explain it visually. Imagine a circle, and a circle just represents a constant flow of action and of energy. And at the top of that circle, you have what would be called prosperity. And at the bottom of that circle, you have pain. And so, what happens with a lot of people at some point in their life, they experience pain. And it comes in different ways. It could be your business, it could be you personally, but you're going through some type of struggle. And by the way, entire societies experience this pride cycle. So, you're at the bottom of the circle, you're going through pain, you say, you know what? I'm sick of this. I want it to stop. And so, you start to do what we would call the little things. So that salesperson might start to make that extra call or send that extra email or reach out or whatever that thing is that's going the extra mile. And because you start to do the little things, now all of a sudden you start to experience success. And you keep doing them until the point where you get to the top of the circle, that journey, and you experience prosperity. But now, because you're in a place of prosperity, suddenly you're like, I'm good. And you start to stop to do those little things that you were doing. So now, instead of having a healthy diet, suddenly you're eating the Twinkies again. And what happens? You start to gain the weight and you get back to the bottom of the circle, which is pain. And then it starts all over again. That's the pride cycle. And if you look at the history of the world, entire countries, civilizations, organizations, and certainly individuals go through different degrees, seasons of that pride cycle over and over and over again.
I certainly have done it. I could probably point to, you know, 6 circles along the way. And one of the best things that ever happened to me was I get fired from a bartending job.
There you go. There's the pain.
Because I was comfortable, I was coasting, I was wasting my 20s, and the other bartender wanted my hours, so he set it up to look like I was stealing. And so the owner fired me for stealing, and I went, I'm not stealing from you, and 2, if I were stealing, you wouldn't figure it out. But I was enraged by that. But ever since, and unfortunately, he passed away years later. But I would, if I saw him years later, I'd have given him $100,000. I'd say, "Thank you for firing me, because that began everything. Because you slapped me into rock bottom, and that's where I needed to be to change."
Yeah, it's like that classic Jim Rohn story where he says his rock bottom. He calls it your moment of disgust and the power of your moment of disgust. He talks about how he was young, in debt, married, and that young Girl Scout knocks on his door. She says, "Would you like to buy a $3 box of cookies?" He says yes, but then he realizes he doesn't have $3, and he has to say no and reject that little girl, and he can't get cookies that day. And he closes the door and he says, "Never, ever again will I allow this to happen," right? And that's the power of the moment of disgust. And that's what I was experiencing as a business owner. I'm going to lose my home. I'm going to have to let go of my 16 employees, right? And it's like, that is an incredible motivator and innovator.
Yeah, it really is a point of discovery. Now, I think your book is so impactful that I want to dive into it, because I'm sure people are very curious about they ask, you answer. And I want to make sure I don't flip it, because I flip it in my mind sometimes.
Yeah,
but
it's been called a little bit of everything.
But it's obviously a very successful book, but there's something unique about it. What is it about that is so impactful to people and so unique? Because there's a million sales books out there. A million's probably a gross underestimation.
Yeah, the Ask You Answer is, I would say, there's a couple things that have made it really successful, because each year since it's been out, it's had a second edition. It's going to have a third edition in January, but it's sold more and more each and every year. So it's one of those unique anomaly books that just keeps growing. The first section of the book is on marketing. The second is on sales, but the two are at this point are so overlapped. I almost consider them the same thing. But really at the core of the book is this, like the thing that it's so known for. It's a very clear, definitive framework that shows you exactly how you can become the most known and trusted voice in your space. All right. A definitive framework that shows you exactly how you can become the most known and trusted voice in your space. But in order to do that, you got to be willing to do a few things. Number one, you got to be willing to talk about what others in your space are not willing to talk about. Most businesses are not, and specifically online. Number two, you got to be willing to show through video what others in your space are not willing to show. Most businesses are not. Number three, you got to be willing to sell in a way that others in your space are not willing to sell. Most sales processes are actually very, very similar. Very few do things that are outside the box. And then finally, number four, you got to be more human than everyone else in your space. All right. So we've got tell, show, sell, and be more human. Now, how does that manifest? Let me give you some examples, Fred, if that's okay with you.
I was going to ask you for exactly that, because give me an example of something that most people don't want to talk about that you have to talk about.
That's exactly right. Okay, so what I found by doing this myself and producing, all of this content with my pool company, and then now having done it with literally thousands of other companies, there's basically 5 subjects that every buyer wants to know before they reach out to a company. In other words, there's 5 things that we tend to always research before we fill out that form, before we make that phone call. There's 5 things we want to know. We call them the big 5. Okay. And here's the big 5. As buyers and consumers, number one, we want to know, how much is it? Like, give me a sense for what's it going to cost me. All right. Everyone has researched cost online many, many times. Number 2, as buyers and consumers, we want to know, what are the problems and the negatives with it? How could this blow up in my face? What could go wrong? Okay. Like when fear enters the picture. So that's number 2. So we've got cost, we've got problems. Number 3, comparisons. We love to compare stuff online. Think about how many times you've gone online and compared one thing versus another. We love to compare because we want to know which one is better, which one is worse, etc. We usually have choices. Number 4, we love reviews. But the thing about reviews is we don't just want to know the good, we want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then finally, number 5, we want to know the best. The best, the most, the top. Think about how many times have you gone online and searched best such and such, right? So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best. Consumers and buyers are obsessed with these subjects. They literally run the economy of search, if you will, online. But businesses don't like to talk about them. 90+% of service-based businesses don't talk about cost and price on their website. Now, if it's okay with you, Fred, can I share a little bit about this whole cost price thing? Because this is always a sensitive topic for many people. Should I or should I not talk about cost and price on my website? So is it okay if we go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. Let's send it, right? So when it comes to cost and price, I just want you to think about your behavior for a second, all right? If we were talking to an audience right now and I said, have you researched how much something cost online last year? Everybody in the audience would say yes. And if I said, so when you're on our website and you're looking for cost and price information and you cannot find it, what's the emotion you experience? You'd say, I get really frustrated. If I said, why do you get frustrated? You'd say, well, I get really frustrated because I'm the buyer and I'm trying to make a buying decision and you're making it really hard. And if I said to you, okay, so in that moment of frustration, do you say to yourself, well, that's okay, they're not talking about cost and price, I'm just going to call them instead? You'd be like, no, you don't do that, because instead of calling them or instead of digging further on the website, which nobody wants to do, what we do is we keep searching and we search until we find what we're looking for. And generally speaking, whoever gives us what we're looking for, they're going to get our business. Not our business, first contact, first phone call. That's how it works for pretty much all of us. Now, if I ask most people, though, are you talking about cost and price on your website right now? Most would say, well, no, but you don't understand, Marcus. You don't understand my situation. You don't understand my business. You don't understand my process, etc. Okay, there's 3 main reasons why people don't like to talk about cost and price. All right, companies don't, businesses don't. Doesn't matter if you're big or small. Number 1, we say every job is different. Every job is different. It depends. It's customized. It's variable. Okay. Well, could you explain what drives the cost of your product or your service up? Yes. Could you explain the factors that drive the cost down? Yes. Could you explain why some companies in your space or competitors are more expensive? Yes. Could you explain why some companies are less expensive? Yes. Could you give the person a rough feel for where you fall without giving them the exact price? Of course, the answer is yes. So the one of it depends, that's the easiest to explain. Very few do it, but that's where you get your value prop. All right, that's number one. Number two reason we don't like to talk about cost and price on our website, we say, I don't want to scare them away because we tend to be more expensive. I'm going to scare them if they see my prices. Actually, what scares us in the process of researching a company isn't when they educate us on what value looks like. What scares us is when they don't talk about it at all. Okay? Ignorance is not bliss online. That's what bothers us. Finally, number three, we say, well, I don't want my competitors to see it. That's pretty much a joke because if you've been in the game for any period of time, and I said to you, do you have a good sense as to what your competitors charge? You would say, yes, I do. So if you have a good sense as to what they charge, it therefore means they have a good sense as to what you charge. This is the big secret, non-secret. Everybody acts like nobody knows what everybody's charging, when in reality, everybody pretty much knows what everybody else is charging. And so, these like excuses we make, they don't hold water. It's not actually how we behave as humans. When I was embracing this mindset of they ask you answer with my pool company, and I was trying to save the business, first piece of content we put on our website was how much does a fiberglass pool cost? That's what we sold. Now, we were the first company in the world to do this, literally online. Nobody had ever done it before, Fred. Why? They were afraid to scare them away. Every job is different. I don't want my competitors to see it. And so we said, you know what? Buying a fiberglass pool is a lot like buying a car. We taught them what it is like to buy a pool. Here's the factors that are going to drive the cost up. Here's the factors that are going to drive it down. Here's why some companies are expensive. Here's why some companies are cheap. Here's some really big ranges. But ultimately, the answer to your question is it depends. But something crazy happened, Fred. Because we were willing to address that question, and because I have tools like HubSpot where I can track the revenue that comes from a single piece of content, that one single piece of content that I wrote, and this was actually now a pretty good while ago, in 2009, it has generated over $35 million in sales for my swimming pool company from people that found us through that article that eventually bought a pool. Over $35 million in sales from an article that literally took me 45 minutes to write on my kitchen table, which is a pretty solid ROI. But I never said exactly how much it cost. And that's the thing. You don't have to say exactly how much it costs.
Yeah, you don't slap a dollar amount up there.
You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it. So
you address cost.
You address it. You teach them value. Because if you don't teach them value, who will? They're going to learn value from somebody else, which I don't know about you, but that drives me crazy. I just abhor the idea that somebody might learn value, whether it's a service, a product, etc., that I sell from someone else. I want them to learn it from me. So the mistake that you see a lot of people make is they just slap a number on a page or something like that. That's not value. You're not explaining the thing. Education decommoditizes. And when you talk about cost and price, and you do it in an incredibly educational way, you decommoditize what you're selling and you become that trusted leader, which is what we're going after. Let me give you one other example of this. Okay. And this is at like the next level. So that was like the low level of cost and price. Let me give you the upper level of cost and price, how you can really break the norms of your industry, be way more bold than anybody else. We're talking about boldness, right? Just discussing cost and price. Like I said, we were the first company in the world to do that. Still, most don't do that. Most service-based businesses don't do that. All right. That's an example of being bold. Recently, I have been talking about the subject of cost and price in so long, and I've helped so many companies like embrace this and benefit from it, that I said, how about I create the easiest price estimator in the world for businesses to put on their website? So I recently just developed, it just came out recently. It's called priceguide.ai. What it is, it's an incredibly simple tool that any industry in the world can go to. You can put in your information and it will essentially tell you, well, if you're going to try to give somebody an estimate for pricing as to what they could expect to spend, here's the questions that they're going to need to ask. And so they go to your website and they basically go through this little tool and they answer a few questions that the tool has helped you set up. And then at the end, they get a general estimate for here's roughly what you're going to spend if you're looking for this service, if you're looking for this product. I had a shed company in Scotland try this tool out, and this was on Friday. And over the weekend, they got 23 leads. And they had 2 walk-ins already this week that did the calculator, and they came in and they said, no other company had this tool. You all had it, and that's why we're buying from you. And so that's an example of talking about showing and selling in a way that no one else in your space is doing it.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. And just comparing it to the dental industry, for 30 or 40 years, dentists have been told to not quote prices over the phone. when somebody calls.
Mm-hmm.
How much does a crown cost? Now, they know the answer, but they don't want people to decide based on the quality of the work. I mean, the price of the work. They want them to decide on the quality of
That's
the
right.
dentistry that they do.
And the problem is, whenever they do that, what's happened? There's a couple things going on in dental space, because I've worked in the dental space. I've had massive success implementing They Ask You Answer in it. What you see in the dental space, and this has to do with anything that's with healthcare, is whenever we can't get an answer, it plants a seed of doubt. And when seeds of doubt exist, inertia occurs. Those dentists in these dental practices, they actually can't account for the amount of people that didn't call because they couldn't find any information. Furthermore, they cannot account for the amount of people that they lost, that they didn't do business with, because they refused to address the subject on the phone. It's no different than that classic used car situation where you try to get the price for the used car and they say, well, come on in and we'll discuss. At this point in time, nobody's coming in and wants to discuss. That is ridiculous in 2024 and beyond. I mean, we've got to be a lot more, like forward thinking than that. And so if we could all track how many customers we have lost because we refused, like the ostrich with its head buried in the sand, to address a fundamental question, it would make us so sick inside that we would immediately say, okay, what do I need to do? Imagine if you were a dentist and if you had all these different, let's say, procedures listed out, separate articles and videos on your site that explained cost. But the way that it did it was by saying, now listen, if you're looking for this type of procedure, let me help you understand what are going to drive the costs up and down. Let me help you understand why some dentists charge less and some dentists charge more. See, this is where you get value, because a crown's not always just a crown, right? Because there's a lot of skill that goes into the procedure, into the work. And so it can go, it's not like a commodity, but the problem is if you don't educate, you commoditize the thing. And now all of a sudden, everybody thinks a crown is a crown is a crown, when that's not actually the case, right? So we see this type of thing over and over again. And if they take the time to educate, man, it's amazing what can happen. Now the person says, oh, I understand you're 10% more, but you still don't have to give exact price. But let's say you openly say, we're about 10% more. But the reason is because we do this, this, and that with every one of our patients. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, I would never not consider doing this, this, and that. Of course I want to use them, and I'm only paying 10% more. Okay. So that's an example of how you can do it. There's many other examples of how you can do this. Let me give you one more, if that's okay, Fred. Is that all right?
Please.
Give one more. One of the classic things that you see in the dental space is people are researching best orthodontist for or best dentist for, and they're looking for their particular procedure and they're looking for their particular town. This is very, very common in the dental space. Okay. Now, in most geo-targeted or geo-based businesses, it works the same. So for a swimming pool company, it might be, who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? Well, when I embraced They Ask You Answer as a pool guy back in the day, I recall, and I was still selling pools at the time. This is quite a few years ago. I was sitting with a customer in Richmond, Virginia, and I gave him a quote. This is after like 2 hours, they said to me, after I gave them the quote, Marcus, we like you. We think we want to do business with you. But if we don't do business with you, is there anybody else you might recommend? And I thought, oh, you're killing me here. And so I didn't sell the pool that night. But I had a long drive home. This is that pain and suffering part again, Fred. I had a long drive home, and I thought to myself, well, they asked the question, which means I need to answer it. So I went home that night, and I wrote an article. And the title of the article was, who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia, reviews/ratings? And I came with a list of 5 of the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia. And the way I chose them was all the companies that I had lost the most business to over the years. Okay. And the way each one I wrote a paragraph, and I took the paragraph, the way I got the description, the words, is essentially from their very own websites. Right? I didn't say anything negative about them. But here's what's wild. Today, if you go online, you search best pool builders Richmond, Virginia, this is probably the first article that you're going to see. Now, if you're outside of Virginia, I don't know if it still shows it, but inside of Virginia shows it. If you today are researching a lot of my competitors, so like one of the companies on the list is Playmore Pools. So if you go online, you research reviews Playmore Pools, Richmond, Virginia, oftentimes you're going to fall you're going to stumble across that article because it's one of the first ones you're going to see. And so now when you're researching my competitors, you're going to learn about my competitors on my website. I was the first person in the world that openly said, when you produce content online, openly talk about your competitors. Anything you're competing with, just talk about it. Don't say negatives, but talk about it. And by doing this, you can own the conversation. It's no different than if you have a method and someone else has a method. Compare those two different methods. You see this a lot in the medical space, right? There's different methodologies, different types of procedures, right? And so you should openly talk about those. Just like if I'm a pool guy, I'm going to compare fiberglass versus concrete. I'm going to compare, a stone patio versus a concrete patio. But I'm also going to compare and talk about the best companies. See, these are all different types of content we did. That's how we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. We were talking about what everyone else said. There's no way we could ever talk about that. I was afraid of nothing. What I was afraid of was losing my business. I certainly wasn't afraid to address a question online that people were going to find the answer for anyway. So my thought was, well, they might as well learn from me and not from somebody else. And if they're going to do business with my competitor, at least I want to inject myself into that conversation.
And so you made yourself the gateway for the information.
Mm-hmm.
And by being open about it, and also you said a couple of really important things. One of the things is don't be negative. And it reminded me, my brother used to sell cars for many years, and he was selling Hondas. And they would ask him very often, the potential buyer would be driving a Honda with him, and they say, but what do you think about Toyotas? And he would invariably say, Toyota makes a really good car. And it would totally disarm the person because they're expecting him to shoot down, to talk about all the flaws of Toyota.
Yeah.
Good service, reliability, good gas mileage.
Speaking of disarming, which I love that point there, Fred. I actually have a whole chapter on what I call disarmament in the book. And one of the big keys that a lot of people don't take advantage of from a psychological perspective online when they're trying to really become a thought leader is they don't understand how to disarm their listener, their reader, their viewer, whoever that is. And in order to disarm, you have to say what someone least expects you to say. Think like it'll almost work against you. So let's use the automotive dealer as an example. It's a perfect one. Okay. So recently I bought a 12-passenger van, and I got a big family, and we have church groups and all this stuff, and so I wanted something that we could use. Now I found a van in Wisconsin that I liked a lot. I'm in Virginia. Now, how am I going to buy that? Well, you got to have a lot of trust if you're going to buy it essentially sight unseen. But the video of the vendor, he posted online and he said, okay, so let's look at this van today. I want to start today with the flaws of this van. And then he did close-ups on all the scratches, the dinks, anything that would be an X against it. Within 30 seconds, I said, he's my guy.
It's genius.
He's my guy. Totally genius. Now, it's the same thing that let's take a new automobile. If you're going to review a new automobile, and almost nobody does this in the automotive space, and you're producing a video, let's say, you would start that video by saying, okay, we're going to look at the new, 2025 Ford Mustang. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about who this vehicle's for, but we're also going to talk about who it's not a good fit for. And then by the end, you'll know whether or not the new 2025 Ford Mustang is a good fit for you. So notice how we're not saying this is the best vehicle I have ever seen. We're saying
in all categories and in all ways for everyone.
That's right. Yes. Which is why at some point in the video, I'm going to try to say, now listen, if you're looking for a lot of room in the back seat, and you've got a large family, you're probably not going to want to get a Ford Mustang, right? Like that's the type of thing that disarms the viewer in this case and says, wow, I can't believe they said that. That is so helpful. But very few companies, individuals, brands, etc., speak that way when they're online. I'm a big HubSpot partner now because I've got this big coaching company, and we help companies do the ask you answer, right? And as part of that, most of our customers use HubSpot. People tell me all the time, well, tell me, Marcus, why I should use HubSpot. And I say, I'm not sure you should use HubSpot. In fact, a lot of people, more often than not, they shouldn't be using it. So let's figure out with you if you should or if you shouldn't. And for over 50% of the people that I end up talking to, I say, no, you shouldn't use HubSpot. Mm-mm. No, it's going to be a waste of your money. And we don't want this to be a treadmill that's a clothes hanger in your room. It's not going to work, right?
Well,
And
and
that's
what
endearing.
you've done is because you talk about two things, and I talk about these same things when I'm speaking to business people, is trust and value. When you do that, that builds trust. When you say this is not for you, someday somewhere else something you have will be for them.
That's right.
Or not, but somebody else is going to come to they say I'm looking for this, and they're going to say, let me tell you who you should talk to, Marcus Sheridan.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done business with him, but he's the only straight shooter I know in the industry.
Right. Right. That's right. And it comes back to your point. It comes back, and quickly you become known as the person that's just willing to call it for what it is. Listen, we've got this massive, as you know, Fred, trust deficit in the world today. As a whole, we don't trust the media. We don't trust politicians. We don't trust brands. And so anything you can do that's a signal that says he or she's not like everybody else. They're willing to look at this from both sides of the coin. They're willing to have my best interest instead of their best interest at heart, right? That's powerful. It's so easy to stand out today by just doing that. That's why communication is such a fundamental skill.
I have to tell you this just because it just happened today. Um, uh, I started a company called 1-800-Dentist back in 1986. And one of the first dentists who joined stayed a member for 24 years, I think. He and his wife were both members straight out of dental school. And we essentially built their practice because they said we can trace about 95% of our patients directly or indirectly to you. And so my birthday was last week, and he dropped something off at my house, and a bottle of wine and the brochure from 1986
Oh, wow.
that he got from me. And I just flipped it open and looked at it. And one of the paragraphs, and I wrote all the copy. I did everything myself because I'm an admin. That's where I came from. And I said, one of the paragraphs was, this program is not for everyone. And I listed who it doesn't work for. And I thought, wow, I was good back then. Maybe I lost my edge, but yeah, it's that
was
thinking.
smart.
Yeah,
That was smart. One time I was at a gig in Tennessee, and it was after a long day. I was tired, and I was hungry, and I was in my hotel, and next to the hotel was a steakhouse, and it was not a cheap steakhouse. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go eat some steak. And I go sit down at my table, and on the cover of the menu, Fred, it says, "Why are our steaks so expensive?" That's what it says.
mm-hmm.
And immediately I'm hooked. I'm just enthralled. I'm like, you've got me. So I open it up. And they got this photo of this like farmer, this is ranch, and it gives this whole story of how all their meat, just select meat, comes from this particular farm that's where the cows live this idyllic lifestyle. And it's like all these things and the processes that they go through for the prep. And by the end of it, I'm like, so you're telling me your fillets are only $43 a piece? I am ready to buy, right? I am
Yeah.
ready. That's the power of that incredible transparency, that boldness, because instead of shying away from it, they were using it as an advantage.
Yeah,
It's so powerful.
They were bold enough to use the word expensive.
Yes,
because that's the disarming word right there. Like, the stuff's expensive? Yeah, come on in and find out why.
Yeah, got me, baby.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it flips because it's actually valuable, and but you're helping them come to their own conclusion about it rather than forcing. I am the most valuable thing you're going to get.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
yep.
Trust me, I'm valuable. Probably the least effective marketing sentence ever written.
And you see it all the time. That's why you got to make them flinch, y'all. You got to make the viewer say, "Huh, I did not expect that." One other story for you. I remember one time as I was thinking about, I was trying to, save my swimming pool company. I was just always thinking outside the box. I was at a store, and there was a magazine rack, right? Just kind of glancing at the magazines, and I saw one. It was like automotive car and driver of the year, and it was talking about the vehicles that had won for like best car in class for that year. And I said, you know what? We don't have that with swimming pools. We certainly don't have that with fiberglass swimming pools. So why couldn't I create one of these myself? So that was when I said, I'm going to create an award system. And so imagine like this, Fred. I was essentially like a Chevrolet dealer. And I said, as a Chevrolet dealer, but I was a fiberglass pool dealer, I'm just using an analogy. I, as a Chevrolet dealer, said, I'm going to give awards out to all these manufacturers for best, in this case, swimming pool shapes in class. And so I said, best kidney shaped pool goes to this manufacturer. Best diving pool goes to this manufacturer. And I was just giving out, I gave out like 10 awards, and I did this big publication on it. And it was crazy because I was giving out these awards to companies I was selling against. I was the Chevy dealer giving to Ford an award, but yet, despite the fact that my competitor, I was doing this. And what's crazy too is like a certain group of manufacturers like, what gives this kid the right to like do this awards? But once they started to see how many people were reading my stuff, I mean, I was just becoming this massive thought leader within the fiberglass swimming pool industry. Now I was getting calls, and these same manufacturers were like, "Hey, Marcus, I see we're not on your award for such and such shape. I'd love to bring you out to the factories. We could show you some of these shapes that we have because we think they would go well with your publication next time." And that's what I mean by being willing to talk about and show and sell in a way that nobody else in your space is. Nobody was doing that. It was so different, but it's what made me the most trusted voice. By the time I was like 35, I was getting calls from around the world. Man, I remember one time this one lady calls me up from the Virgin Islands and says, Marcus, I'm getting a fiberglass swimming pool installed. Do you think you would be willing to fly out and to oversee the project? I just don't fully trust my installer, but I really trust you. Everything I've learned about pools, I've learned from you.
And dang it, you have to go to the Virgin Islands and endure that whole experience.
Can you believe that type of this? But this is what's, but if you're going to, if you want these types of experiences, you cannot walk the same path as everybody else. Can't do it.
Well, the other thing that you've done is you're acknowledging how modern sales and buying behavior works because of the online world. If you ignore that and on a super tactical level, by generating all of this traffic to your website, this SEO skyrockets. This is, what everybody wants, you're generating by giving extraordinary, honest, valuable information on your website that anybody can use. And even if you're talking about a competitor, they're on your website learning about.
You're winning. That's right.
You're already winning. This is you have captured the traffic, if nothing else. You've captured the SEO. So you got 2 out of 3 already. Eventually, more people are just going to gravitate back to you. They're going to say, yeah, now I looked at everybody else, but I'm going back to Marcus's site because I just felt more comfortable there. Right? Yeah, that's the weird thing that happens.
Yeah, you want to look at it like every piece of content they consume from you is like you're going on another date with that person. And if you go on enough dates with someone, eventually you're going to consummate the relationship, right? And so that's how this works. I was once I was studying all the people that had bought a pool from me versus all the ones that had filled out a form and not bought a pool, but had an appointment. So it's like, what's the difference between the people that had an appointment and bought versus had an appointment and didn't buy? And I noticed number 30 kept jumping out, and that number 30 represented total pages viewed. Here's what I found, Fred. It's really wild. If somebody read 30 or more pages of our website before the initial sales appointment, they would buy 80% of the time. If they didn't hit that number, closing rates were about 25%. And so as soon as I realized that, I said, oh my goodness. So if I just get people to read, consume at least 30 pieces of our content, they're going to buy 4 out of 5 times if I go to their home. And then suddenly we just revamped, revolutionized really how we sell. We called it assignment selling. And so people would call me up and like, hey, Marcus, can you come out to my house and give me a quote for a pool? And I'd say, sure, Fred, I'd love to come out to your house. But you're getting ready to spend a lot of money. And if you're going to spend a lot of money, I know you don't want to make any mistakes. And so as to make sure you don't make any mistakes, I want to make sure you're well educated. So here's what's going to happen. As we're having this conversation on the phone right now, Fred, I'm going to send you 2 things that you're going to love. Now, the first thing I'm going to send you is a video that shows you the entire process of the install. Like when the pool shows up to your house, goes in the ground, patio goes around it, the cleanup, the whole 9. And this way, when I come out to your house, you're not going to have to say, so Marcus, what does this process look like? You're already going to know. Now, that saved me just 30 minutes right now on the sales appointment. That just saved me 30 minutes. Now, the second thing I'm going to send you, Fred, is this guide. This guide's great because it's going to answer all the questions that you have about pools that you should know, but you probably haven't gotten answers to yet. Questions like, should I get a cover with my pool? What's the best type of cover? Should it be mesh? Should it be solid? Should it be automatic? Should I get a heater? What's the best type of heater? Should it be gas? Should it be electric? Should it heat and cool my water? Should it be solar, right? So we're going to answer all these questions. The great thing about this guide, it's so informative, but it's a little bit long. It's about 30 pages, but I promise it's going to be well worth your time. So Fred, will you take the time to watch that video and review that guide before I come out to your house on Friday? 90% of the time, Fred says, sure. And if that's the case, and if he does his homework, I know he's going to buy 4 out of 5 times, right? So we call that assignment selling. You can read about it in the book. It's really simple to do. But the key is you get very explicit as to what the assignment is, why it matters, so that you don't make any mistakes, right? Tease it out with some of the bits of information. And they're saying to themselves, geez, I don't know that answer. I should probably know that. And then get a clear commitment. Fred, will you take the time to review these things before our appointment on Friday? That's Sales 101, right? It's very simple to do. But I know that when I come into that home and Fred has done his homework, he's going to love me. He's going to be invested in me. His sunk costs are greater in me than any other company. He's going to feel like everything he learned about pools, he learned from me. That's how we became the Wikipedia of pools. But this is possible for any industry. Now, somebody might say, well, AI is ruining this for all of us, Marcus. And listen, AI is going to do what AI does, but you still need to be a thought leader. And you need to talk about and show and sell in a way that others are not. And you can do that through text and video. You can do it through social. You can do it through podcasts, just like Fred here is doing. And that's where you put your stake in the ground. But you can't sit there and be passive and just say, well, I'm defeated because AI is taking over the game. I think you can be a huge fan of AI. I think it's going to change our lives for the better. And I think, too, you can still build a phenomenal brand and still people are still using the internet. They're still using Google. They're still using YouTube more than ever, using social more than ever. So plant your stake in the ground there.
So I'm going to switch lanes here and talk about your personal life. And tell me the most gratifying thing about your personal life, totally outside of business.
Well, for me right now, it would certainly be that the relationship I have with my wife after 25 years roughly of marriage is better than it's ever been. We've got 4 children. We've got a grandchild. And it is incredibly, incredibly satisfying to go through the peaks and valleys together and come out on top. Relationships have pride cycles. You go through seasons of pain and seasons of prosperity. And if you always do the little things, you can maintain much longer seasons of prosperity, of peace, of joy, of happiness. And I feel like, I've caught that rhythm, with my wife. So that's very, very satisfying. And, I think for me, the other thing on a professional level is I'm saying things that are making a real impact. Almost every day somebody reaches out and says, your book changed my life. And that's satisfying. I don't need the praise. What I need is to feel like that I'm using the talents that God's given me. That's always been the motivator for me. I don't need an audience. I don't need the like. I don't need the cheer. What I need, and the reason why I speak for a living, is because I feel like that's what I was called to do. That's my higher purpose. And that's where I can have my greatest impact. And that's a very satisfying feeling, knowing you're doing what you were put on this earth to do. I think everybody can find that. Um, but you gotta get out there and just send it.
Yeah, and it won't be an easy path to find it. I mean, there's going to be, uh, I was just listening to something talking about a very interesting concept called the path of not here, which is basically that understanding that you learn something from being where you shouldn't be or aren't, that isn't where you ought to be, want to be, or are trying to get to. Whether it's in a relationship where you say, yeah, I think I got to the good relationships in my life because I had all the ones I thought I wanted and got through them and realized I didn't want them. I was not in the right place with those things I wanted. And so that idea of uh, finding where you are using your gifts to have the greatest impact on the most people, the deepest impact. And I have that experience myself where I don't need the whole audience to give me a giant 15-minute standing ovation. I need one woman to come up to me and say, this is what I needed to hear
That's right.
today.
That's right.
And I'm in that was worth it. That was worth the travel, the Uber, the hotel, staring at the wall, whatever the heck, to be able to do that for somebody. Because if I did it for her, I maybe did it for 10 or 15 other people, maybe 10% of that audience if I'm lucky. Or maybe 5 years from now, they're just like you, they're at a point where they're at the full pain point and they say, wow, what was Marcus talking about? I'm here. What was it? Oh yeah, this is what I have to do. And it comes back to them when they need it. So your delivery and reception had a 5-year gap to it, but it happened. And that's a great thing to be able to do.
It's a beautiful thing. It's been a beautiful journey. You know, I knew when I was 20 that I wanted to be a speaker, but I didn't have a story. I didn't ever expect to be a pool guy. But the pool guy ended up becoming the story and opened the door for the speaking. And that's how life works. They say the more you seek happiness, the less happy you are. Right? And that's why it's like, okay, that's why we got to get in the sandbox and we got to play. We got to do the thing. And in the course of doing that, all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And you're doing it. And that's a beautiful thing. But if we sit there and we look for happiness, there's almost one guarantee, which is you're probably not going to find it.
Yeah, because you're chasing almost a sensation,
an idea,
rather than a fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big difference. And we live in a world where all of the sensation satisfiers are there. It's a bigger car. It's a bigger watch. It's all of these things that if you could actually measure their impact, because I say to people, I'm lucky enough to have made a bunch of money and bought all the things that I realized made almost no difference in my life. So now I don't care. Now people
That's
say,
great.
well, why don't you can afford this kind of car. Why don't you drive it? And I said, because I don't care. It's like, it won't make, I've paid an extra $1,000 a month for a car and it made me 2% happier for 3 months. It's
That's
like,
right.
but I had a 3-year lease, so
That's right.
when you do it enough, you go, oh, what made me happy? Oh, I know what made me happy. One of my closest friends' father died suddenly, and I jump on a plane and I'm there with him for the week. And I stopped everything and I canceled everything. And I was able to do that. That was what my money was for.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's why we do the things that we do right there, right? To give us the freedom to be able to make those choices.
Yeah, to do what we ought to be doing, and
That's right.
and what we would most be important for us in the long run on reflection at the end of our life, and also with those people that are close to us in the circles of our life. And I have circles and circles of great people in my life, but there is the immutable dozen around me that there's nothing they can't ask, and there's nothing I won't sacrifice for them. And
Yeah.
they know it, and it's the same from them. And so that to me is the real success in life, is where you can always be where you ought to be and do what you ought to be doing.
That's what it's all about, brother.
Yeah. Well, Marcus, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I recommend everyone get Marcus's book, They Ask, You Answered, because if they are asking, you need to be answering, and you need to be thinking about how to do that, to be unique and to be brand distinct, and also to, have the most enjoyable type of success and take it into your personal life as well. Marcus, your name is your website, Marcus Sheridan, Marcus Sheridan. And the book is, I'm sure, on Amazon and everywhere else. And he is a phenomenal keynote speaker. If you're looking for somebody to impact your corporation, you're not going to do much better than Marcus. So highly recommend you track him down and let him tell you how much it costs right away. So, Marcus, thank you very much. Great to meet you. I look forward to seeing you out on the speaking road, if not at Brand Builders Group somewhere.
Thank you.